Tony Kinnett.
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 The host of the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Let's get down to business.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett, and hopefully, if everything has in fact gone right, if you're listening to us on the radio waves, it's a little bit clearer than usual. Getting a few updates through the miraculously delightful snowstorms this afternoon. And that led to a bit of an interesting circumstance for the show, which would be a lot of individuals who've watched a lot of conservative radio and TV will be acquainted with Bill O'Reilly. And back in the day, Bill O'Reilly had a certain episode where the camera was on, he wasn't aware of it, and there had been so much news broken that day that the entire show that had been written had to be tossed out like hot garbage right before the show. And so producers were trying to run over and futz with Bill O'Reilly's blazer and his hair, and they were trying to give him some new notes and trying to adjust things here and there. And finally, he said very famously, screw it, we'll do it live, with a different word in the first. And that has boiled down to what became of this particular episode, because what is coming out of California, what is coming out of the Biden administration and comments made just a few moments ago by President Joe Biden that were strangely absent from the radio news bumper for many of you listening before the show, are some of the most disturbing comments of any U.S. president in U.S. history. So we're going to go through those, but first, of course, an update on the fires in Los Angeles. As this continues, and by as this continues, I mean both the investigations by independent journalists a lot of the time into the fires that are taking place in LA and the Pacific Palisades, as well as the incompetence and the downright malicious actions of Mayor Bass, as well as Governor Gavin Newsom, including the Biden administration and their policies against decent forest management. There appear to be some, as if things couldn't get any worse, here you go, they're going to get worse. There was an individual that was caught today blowtorching things. And the police picked him up and said, there's a lot of wildfires going on right now. And, one might say that you shouldn't probably be just blowtorching stuff on the ground at the present time. And they arrested him. Because, as we have found out in a lot of cases, for example, like the Maui wildfires, it appeared that arson was, in fact, on the menu. And so the LAPD hauled him in, and then, you guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, they let him go.
But they responded, they interviewed this suspect. After the interview and additional investigative steps, looking at some additional evidence that was present, they made the determination that there was not enough probable cause to arrest this person on arson or suspicion of arson, and therefore this person was arrested on a felony probation violation. This investigation is ongoing, however, and I'd like to thank those community members that were involved in this and helping us bring this person to our attention, and so we can have an ongoing investigation. The second point I want to talk about.
So that is a serious issue, because if you were watching the live stream, you're not listening, but you're actually checking the show out over on X or on YouTube or one of our TV affiliate partners, then you might have noticed the individual bent over his car, looking an awful lot like some of the individuals that have been crossing into Los Angeles recently. And the reason I say that is because the LAPD refuses to release the individual's name. That's kind of suspicious, don't you think? Because, man, it sure would be interesting if there was an individual who happened to be from, let's say, Iran or a radical Muslim organization who was setting fires as an act of terror here in the United States, which is very likely. Or perhaps an illegal immigrant trying to cause certain amounts of chaos before a certain administration took over. These are questions that deserve to be asked and answered, but right now, the Democrats have a policy of refusing to certify these arrests and just letting people go. And not just in blue states, but in red states and blue cities. Prosecutors, as well as district attorneys, are constantly letting criminals off the hook or really failing to prosecute them at all. because, oh, they're just minor crimes like shoplifting or, just what's a little armed robbery among friends, or so he's an illegal immigrant who committed a nonviolent crime, and maybe the nonviolent crime led to the death of an individual, as in the cases of several New York deaths. But hey, I mean, come on. And then for restorative justice reasons or racial equity reasons or just good old fashioned, we don't actually want to use the police to, do their jobs kinds of reasons, these individuals are let back out on the street. So there you go, Los Angeles. There you go. It turns out that not arresting people for shoplifting eventually leads an individual who was running around with a lit blowtorch during wildfires. Oh, no probable cause. Maybe he was just lighting cigarettes. I mean, hey, who out there hasn't enjoyed a nice cigar lit by a blowtorch, which had clearly been on for like 2, 3, 4 minutes at least because of the distortion of the tip of the blowtorch as far as the color is concerned. So fantastic stuff out of Los Angeles. However, Bernie Sanders and other Democrats, they don't really care at all if this was an arsonist or not, because they're going to blame this on climate change. So much so that Bernie Sanders is straight up making videos about it and directly blaming the wildfires on climate change. One of the more shocking videos I've seen in quite some time. Here's Bernie Sanders narrating climate change, not arson.
The debate is long over. Climate change is real. My God.
And look at this. It is, it is block after block here.
This is a very, very major crisis.
Block after block.
This is one of the worst situations that we have ever seen.
We know climate change is making the kind of hot, dry weather California has experienced in recent months more likely.
Okay, so he goes on for another 2 minutes droning on about how the climate change, in which, by the way, is not actually reducing the amount of rainfall to California. Climate change should really be relegated to cyclical climate patterns that have been going on for a long time that I used to teach my students about, because we have documented evidence that isn't Greta Thunberg shouting about your dreams, but about, actual, genuine, verifiable, reproducible science that California goes through dry seasons and California goes through wet seasons. And it turns out that when you, as the state authority, do not allow water to be brought down from the northern portion of the state, and do not allow Californians to collect rainwater, but force it to be dumped into the Pacific Ocean, which creates another kind of ecological disaster, by the way, you're creating a situation that is far more likely to be detrimental due to wildfires or due to arson. And yet Bernie Sanders, it's climate change that did it. Okay. Fantastic. So far, we've let an arsonist go, and we have also made the brilliant decision to just blame it all on climate change, because that way you don't actually have to blame Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass for their incredible incompetence. No worries, though. Biden was out there, mixing it up a little bit there, getting his boots muddy there on the ground with Kamala Harris, and decides that what the moment really needs, amid this disaster of people losing everything, including 12 dead now at least, is Biden telling Kamala Harris, why don't you fire away?
Madam Vice President, I know you're directly affected, so you fire away. No pun intended.
All right, as the president throws it to the vice president.
Wow. Fire away. Absolutely just. So yesterday, it was that he was a great grandparent. That's the good news. That's the rosy side of things. And then, flip that around. Well, hey there, ladies and germs. Hey, fire away, Kamala. Ha, ha, ha. What good jovial fun. The disconnect between the left, especially this president and the American people, is truly something unique. At least Obama was good at pretending to be empathetic with people. Biden couldn't even be empathetic with the American people unless he dragged his son into the equation and tried to say that he understood what people were going through, like Gold Star parents, because his son died at home in bed decades after he got home from the Middle East. And now here he is cracking jokes. I really do enjoy the double standard that if Donald Trump tosses paper towels to people, that's somehow making a mockery of everything. But Biden gets in front and he starts pulling a Seinfeld routine. Hey, Kramer, fire away. Then, that's totally fine. Oh, well, I mean, come on, he's just a nice old guy that enjoys ice cream. Well, Biden, I really try to keep at least the superlatives of the most or the least out of my vocabulary as much as possible, because I really do want the words that I use to have impact. I really do believe that after what we saw this evening, I am prepared to say this is the most corrupt administration in U.S. history, and it's not even close. More corrupt than the Obama administration, more corrupt than the Warren G. Harding administration, which used to be the record holder for the most corrupt administration in history. We're going to dig into that, and this is developing as people start to dig in. It starts at Carter's funeral, and it works its way to what is an unreal use of presidential power. We'll be back in a second. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Let's talk a little bit about the most corrupt administration here in U.S. history. So before, the record holder prior to Joe Biden was a guy by the name of Warren G. Harding, who's basically invented the presidential corruption scandal to this degree. He was giving out jobs to anyone who was willing to pay him money. I mean, the checks weren't even run through the paper mill. They weren't even laundered. It was so flagrant. The amount of court cases that Harding tried to lean on, basically doing all but tamper directly with the Supreme Court and Congress itself. There's suspicion that Harding was possibly liable for multiple murders of possible political opponents. That used to be the gold standard for corruption. But there were certain lines that Harding did not cross. And when Harding was finally basically put to the ire of the public, he didn't try to circumvent it. He'd been caught doing some shady things, and then he basically laid down his arms in, I'm being colloquial here, and he went home. Now, President Biden, no. So Biden in his current state may not look like much, but it is important to remember that it's not much. Here's Biden just straight up asleep at Jimmy Carter's funeral. To be clear, this is not a screenshot. You can actually see the other faces moving: Bush, Hillary, and Biden's he's just out like a light. I mean, look, I've seen enough elderly asleep at church. Hey, I've been asleep at the occasional church service, at a morning chapel after a very early morning in the microbiome lab, for example, when I was in college. It happens to the best of us. If you're the president of the United States, though, and you're sitting at an important funeral, probably not. But that's okay, because Biden was up later bragging about how there was something Jimmy Carter was really, really leaning into in his entire life when he was a president, later after his presidential time, and he was just a stellar individual for a very specific reason. And so Biden just needed to brag a little bit about something that I certainly don't think he has any position to brag on.
Thank you. President Trump to take from President Carter?
Decency.
So for those who are listening and not watching, he's got the creepy Joker smile on. He was asked, what can Trump take as a lesson from Carter, as though Biden is the expert on familial whatever. And he gets his big Joker smile and he says, decency, Batman, decency, decency.
Decency. Everybody deserves a shot. Everybody. Can you imagine Jimmy Carter walking by someone who needs something and just keep walking?
Yes, if that was an individual who was opposed to a dictatorship or a regime that beat women, yeah, Jimmy Carter absolutely would walk by them. Jimmy Carter loved, with a capital L, any dictatorship at all. Jimmy Carter is responsible single-handedly, after his time as president, for the majority of dictatorships on the face of the earth. But please, decency and walking by individuals. Biden, go.
Can you imagine Jimmy Carter referring to someone by the way they look or the way they talk? I can't. I think the end of the deal here is that one of the reasons why we're looked to by the rest of the world. For the bulk of our nationhood, we've laid out what our values are. We've said what we believe. It's not just in the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, but there's a feeling. The rest of the world looks to us. And he was worth looking to. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So Biden, in the end, references something he said the day prior, which is that Carter was always very strongly believed about upholding the rule of law, and that's what I do, and these truths are self-evident. And then he references that again today. Well, these truths are self-evident. It's all about the values and upholding the law. And that's very interesting coming from the president who not only pardoned, international terrorists and sex offenders and human traffickers and some of the most evil people on planet Earth, but his own son, not just for crimes that he did commit, but any crimes he may have committed whatsoever. And this use of the presidential pardon when Joe Biden is completely mentally gone is not only questionable constitutionally, whether he is mentally capable enough to stand trial or he is not mentally capable enough and therefore shouldn't be issuing pardons. You can't run the executive branch when you want to and then run the executive branch when you don't want to. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. That isn't how it works. But then Karine Jean-Pierre, out of the mystical woods, graces us with a press conference and lets us in on something coming down the pike here in just a couple of days.
In his interview with the USA Today earlier this week, the president talked a bit about preemptive pardons, saying that they are still potentially on the table. Can you speak a little bit about the scope that he is considering when it comes to that, and if he's any closer to it?
So we have been saying that the president will have more to say, more to announce on pardons and commutations. So that is, we have 10 days to go. So certainly that will be very soon that we'll make those announcements. I'm not going to get into the scope. I'm not going to get ahead of the president, but we will be making some more additional announcements.
So what are those additional announcements? Because especially after the, we'll get to the kinds of corruption that are being exposed still here in just a few minutes. But Biden is ready to get out there and do cartwheels in front of the staff like they said he was doing behind closed doors. Man, Biden's ready. Just a little bit ago, Biden got out in front of the country and announced his plan for pardoning, and it is wild.
Can you just give us a sense of what other pardons and commutations you're considering in your last 10 days?
Well, the answer is no, because of two things. One is that it depends on some of the language and expectations that Trump broadcast in the last couple days here as to what he's going to do. The idea that he would punish people for not adhering to what he thinks should be policies related to his well-being is outrageous. But there's still consideration of some folks, nothing but no decision.
All right, thanks.
That is insane. And they immediately cut him off and shuttle him away because what the president of the United States just said is, in fact, the most corrupt statement openly admitted by any president in U.S. history. Any president whatsoever in U.S. history. None of them have ever said, I have not decided who I am going to pardon, not because I think the justice system has wronged them. That is what the pardon is for. The justice system made a mistake. This person was tried. They were convicted. I think there was a mistake. Something was part of the circumstance that didn't work right. And so therefore, I'm issuing a pardon to this person. That is what the pardon system is for. It is constitutionally outlined. And Joseph R. Biden gets up in front of the country after pardoning his son prior, the finger painter crack man, who photos have since been released with Joe Biden and Hunter schmoozing it up with China and Ukrainian officials, openly influence peddling and probably changing foreign policy and soft paving the way for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, not to mention the likely strengthening of China, the United States' greatest threat. But Joe Biden gets up in front of the country today and says, I haven't decided who I'm going to pardon yet because I don't know who Trump's going to go after. And it's not, did these individuals break any laws? Did these individuals defraud the American people? Did these individuals fail to uphold their constitutional oath? Did these individuals break any kind of statute or rule or regulation? Did they commit a crime? No, it's Donald Trump might ask questions. And so if I need to issue preemptive pardons to clear them for anything whatsoever, he will. That is the exact opposite of the American justice system. Because, by the way, if Donald Trump chooses to go after people, there are safeguards put in place. Those people still have to be tried in front of a jury. They can't just be thrown in the hoot scow for eternity. Donald Trump was just the target. Today, the end of the long targeted attack by the Department of Justice under Joe Biden against Donald Trump through Alvin Bragg's office in New York. That entire debacle ended today. Donald Trump still had to go through all of the processes. Joe Biden, however, is forbidding the constitutional process of investigation and justice through the court system to even begin. It is the most corrupt action in the history of this country, bar none, no exceptions. And that's before we even get to the Mark Zuckerberg and the Meta stuff. This is beyond disgusting. We're going to talk about it. Stick around. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
All right, let's talk for just a few seconds about the Watergate scandal. So the Watergate scandal during the Nixon administration from 1972 basically involved a group of individuals ordered by the president to illegally wiretap and audio tap the DNC. And the purpose of doing this was to, gain insights on political maneuvers, this, that, and the other. I'm not going to get into the specific details of Watergate. But the reason this was a major scandal to the American people was because it was a president using the weight and the authority of the office of the President of the United States in a political fashion to harm his opponents, to gain things unfairly from his opponents. And because once you have, things said in a wiretap, you could order, at the height of the Cold War, there's very little that you couldn't order. And that was the problem. So now we look a little bit ahead to what the Biden administration, at the time that he's issuing pardons for individuals like Anthony Fauci, possibly, most likely, and Liz Cheney ahead of time, why this is so disturbing, and very likely Alejandro Mayorkas, Merrick Garland, etc. What the Biden administration did via social media companies makes Watergate look like a $15 fine from your local city council. It makes the Watergate scandal look like the Trump throwing paper towels scandal. Because what the Biden administration did in 2020, and this is now on file via the Twitter files, emails publicly released by the Matt Taibbi Twitter files investigation through Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg announced in an open letter. Also, files were leaked from the Meta organization, as well as FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, documents, including federal government emails, in which Biden's administration and individuals who were allied with the Biden administration inside the Trump White House corroborated and then coerced social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., to suppress political content that they did not like, including suppressing political content about an investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's influence peddling via Ukrainian company Burisma. But that's not all. They also completely removed content and threatened legal action if Facebook and Twitter did not censor information regarding the COVID-19 virus from Wuhan, China, if they didn't censor information about the COVID vaccines, which aren't even vaccines, they're an mRNA experiment. And a vaccine is an inoculation from a dead or partially dead virus or bacteria that your body learns to fight. The mRNA changes the code for how your body produces antibodies for a short amount of time. And Mark Zuckerberg then came out after Trump won his electoral victory, and he said they were completely changing their policy for a number of things over at Facebook, Meta, and Instagram. And then Mark Zuckerberg went on Joe Rogan and gave one of the craziest accounts of the federal corruption and trying to quash the First Amendment and corruptly influence elections and the United States economy, as well as the United States justice system I've ever seen. It's not even close. Take a look at this.
These people from the Biden administration would call up our team and like scream at them and curse, and it's like these documents it's all kind of out there.
Did you record any of those phone calls?
I don't think we but I think
I want to listen.
I mean, there are emails. the emails are published. It's all kind of out there, and they're like,
as a pause, it was illegal for Mark Zuckerberg likely to record those phone calls because California is not a state that allows you to record phone calls unless the other person is being alerted to it. So, for example, where I'm in Indiana, if you call me, I can record the phone call. I don't have to worry about it because we have a recording statute that allows that. In California, they don't because they're terrified that people will, record this exact kind of stuff.
And basically, it just got to this point where we were like, no, we're not gonna take down things that are true. That's ridiculous. They wanted us to take down this meme of Leonardo DiCaprio looking at a TV talking about how 10 years from now or something, you're going to see an ad that says, okay, if you took a COVID vaccine, you're eligible for, for this kind of payment, like this sort of like class action lawsuit type meme. And they're like, no, you have to take that down. And we just said, no, we're not going to take down humor and satire. We're not going to take down things that are true. And then at some point, I guess, I don't know, it flipped a bit. I mean, Biden, when he gave some statement at some point, I don't know if it was a press conference or to some journalists, where he basically was like, these guys are killing people. And I don't know, then like all these different agencies and branches of government basically just like started investigating, coming after our company. It was brutal. It was brutal.
That's nuts. That is nuts. The Biden administration likely investigated social media companies. And by what I mean investigation, I mean they're looking for a crime to charge you with. That's what, in agency level investigations, that's what that is. Ask someone who's been investigated by the IRS anytime. And if you're investigated by the IRS, they're going to look until they find a crime. That is how agencies operate, by the way. That's agency directors have made that case. That's not in any way, shape, or form a conspiracy theory. That is openly proclaimed by the IRS. So federal agencies were ordered. And then later on, remember those social media companies that were dragged before Congress to be lectured by people like Dianne Feinstein? And that were lectured that if you do not change, we will shut you down. They tried to do trust busting on Meta, just like they've tried to do on Google and likely on Elon Musk at some point. This is a wicked level of corruption. It's never been seen anywhere close to this level in American history. The idea that a sitting president and his administration through Merrick Garland, who every day I get on my knees and thank God he is not a member of the Supreme Court of the United States. Merrick Garland is one of the most disturbingly corrupt individuals who has no sense of the law whatsoever. You want to talk about the surface level ethical garbage of Donald Trump and whether he did or didn't pay off a porn star. Okay, that never will affect me whatsoever. The Attorney General and the President of the United States trying to coerce social media companies into shutting down entire waves of speech on something that likely caused serious heart problems in an entire generation of individuals who took them is one of the most corrupt actions ever taken by the United States government. And again, Mark Zuckerberg is no conservative. And like he pointed out, it's like these emails are already out there. You don't have to make up something and he said, she said kind of a situation. These are emails from federal officials who are openly saying you are killing people because you are allowing a meme about this experimental vaccine to disseminate among the people. Therefore, you should be investigated and possibly arrested, fined millions of dollars and whatnot. That is disgusting. And by the way, those same things likely twisted the outcome of the 2020 election, likely impacted the outcome of the 2022 midterms. And Joe Biden has the audacity to get in front of the country and say, decency, 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 not above the law, while he prepares to pardon and does pardon Hunter Biden for his entire wing of crimes that he may have committed or he may have not committed, I don't know, and then turns around and prepares to pardon anyone who might be investigated for what is easily the greatest scandal in the history of this country, by gross and by net, the largest impact illegally against any election system, against the United States economy, against the justice system. I mean, ethics don't even begin to enter this conversation on the realm of Joe Biden's actions. It is a constitutional crisis that the President of the United States is able to issue pardons for anything they may have done. It was a mistake when Gerald Ford did it. It's a mistake when Biden's doing it. And mark my words, if that is not fettered, it will be the end of the republic in the constitutional state that it is now. Because if you have a president that can issue just blanket magical pardons for whatever they want, whenever, I don't care if it's Sotomayor or if it's Thomas that rules that is okay. That is an unlimited form of power. An unlimited form to pardon for whatever crimes they may have committed during a season. Thank God that cannot touch state governments, because now it is truly up to the states of the United States and those attorney generals out there to take action and investigate. And by the way, if it comes out that these individuals like Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney, whoever is involved in any way, shape, or form, Merrick Garland, Mayorkas, who, by the way, Biden and Mayorkas, who haven't even been able to touch on this, has now just extended the temporary protected status for 600,000 Venezuelans here illegal, 230,000 Salvadorians here illegally, 103,000 Ukrainians, 1,900 Sudanese, and gives them until October 2026 to stay in the country. It is inherent on attorney generals to investigate these individuals from the federal government for crimes against those states. And by the way, if they're cleared and it was found they didn't do anything, they didn't actually meet those crimes, good. But the investigation, there was more than enough probable cause at this point to suggest that serious crimes against the state and against the citizens were committed. We're going to be back in just a minute for a bit of mail time. Stick around. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
Mail time.
Mail time.
Mail time. On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC out of Indianapolis. It's time for a bit of mail time. Now, look, comment question periods where you take a little bit of input from the audience is nothing new. It's nothing super special. I, quite honestly, when we started the show, I racked my brain of how to make something super special and original. You know, do I listen to voicemails or do I take live calls? Because that's never been done before. And I ended up just coming up with a basic kind of a mail time thing. I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel, but we'll at least try to make the answers interesting. And there are a couple of really great questions this week, one that really ties into the theme. The first is from Tim. He asks, do you think that Mark Zuckerberg, and then he kind of describes what Zuckerberg has been doing recently, is turning a conservative leaf, or is he just saying stuff to avoid falling afoul of Trump? I think it's a bit of both. I do, but I don't think it's turning a conservative leaf in that way. There are a lot of really interesting studies, at least as far as surveys have shown over the last couple of years. A Pew Research Center study is coming to mind, but that's not the primary one. There's a book that I'm thinking of. I'll get the title and throw it in the description when I remember which one it is, that shows that a lot of liberal CEOs, individuals that run a lot of left-leaning companies, live their personal lives very conservatively. Their kids don't watch a lot of TV. They definitely don't have their own devices. They're raised on kind of a traditional moral system. And this idea of kind of living one life and then preaching another has some negative consequences, because after a while, people start to recognize the stuff you're preaching doesn't work. This is what people are seeing in California right now. It's what people have seen over this country the last 4 years. Biden was in front of the country this evening bragging about never having a single quarter in which jobs were not lost, which, by the way, not how that works. And also suggesting that right before him, there was a ton of jobs that were just lost. That's no, adding jobs back to COVID, not the same thing. People don't fall for that is what I'm saying. No one out there is saying, oh, wow, the Biden economy is fantastic. No. So once that falls apart, you do see a lot of people that looked to the left, especially right after the November election, and said, hey, Democrats, are you guys going to moderate now? Like this DEI, trans, socialist, goofy nonsense, the racial equity. We can move past that and get back to kind of a more spending, more taxation style of governance, right? Like that's what we're looking for, yeah? And the left looked at the constituents and said, no. Well, everyone except for John Fetterman. John Fetterman is the last 90s Labor Democrat in the entire party. He's all they've got left. He's the last one. And so what you're seeing is a lot of people who aren't turning Republican. There are a few, but you are seeing a lot of people who are disconnecting from a lot of the rhetoric that the left has relied on to get people to the polls. I think you're going to see whether or not this is a massive wave of individuals based on the special elections to fill the nomination spots for Trump seats. For example, Elise Stefanik in New York. That's going to be an interesting election because you're going to see a good amount of Republican and Democrats called to come and vote for whoever will replace her. But it remains to be seen whether the Democrats in New York, who up to now, Kathy Hochul's just run around in circles saying the subway is fine, the subway is fine, the subway is fine. And that just isn't really working anymore. The evidence is rather to the contrary. That's what the next question by Kate. Do you think Californians might elect a Republican? No, I don't think that we're there. What you're seeing is a general disdain and a distaste for the utopian promises the left has brought forward. So case in point, I used to work at Indianapolis Public Schools. And at the time, Superintendent Alicia Johnson would come out every single year and would announce two things. Number one, academic scores are still like awful. And number two, we're totally going to do better next year. And that never happened ever. And we would just keep going around and around and around and around and around. And what you're seeing now, there's actually a bill in Indiana that would deconsolidate that school district, which 100% needs to happen. The IPS public school system is a bloated garbage corpse and needs to be taken apart piece by piece for the sake of not only the students, but the teachers. If the teachers knew what the administrators above them were being paid and how many of them there were, they would be salty sailors. So I don't think that you're going to see a new wave of like elections for Republicans per se. What you are going to see instead is a loss of support for Democrat candidates. Now that's in a way just as good if you're looking at an electoral angle, because elections are about getting people over the hump of going out and voting or mailing in the ballot. Because voting is like going to the DMV. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It sucks. It's a long line, arduous, for very little emotional payoff. And so if you can get people over the hump on the Republican side of the aisle, and you can't on the Democrat side of the aisle because of consistent letdown, well, that's going to have a serious electoral shift. That does it for this particular week of coverage. We'll be back next week. And seriously, folks, I'm telling you, this inauguration coverage is going to be great. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast. Take care.